it also becomes the sticking point. I've met a lot of people that get stuck on the X um, in their own mind. Like maybe there are a lot of you men out there who are like, "Hey, I'm never going to be successful. I'll never be a protector. I'll never be a provider." You're stuck on the X, man. You have bought into the bullshit of negativity. And the reality is to get off the X, I mean, action is the answer. Movement is the answer. Driving forward is the answer. And that applies whether it's in a gunfight or whether it's in a mental ambush in your mind and you're stuck on the X. In my book, Overcome, I teach something called the REACT methodology.
And for those of you guys who don't know, this gentleman right here is Mr. Jason Redman right here is an absolute legend and a badass. And I wish I can dedicate the whole episode just to you, Coach. But let's jump right into the topic. So thank you again for being here.
Honored, man. Thanks for having me on.
Exactly. Perfect. No bad days. I love that. My first question to you is this. I'm sure you're already all caught up with all, the situation, the news and the press conferences and the tactical videos and all that. What happened with our candidate, Donald Trump? What do you think, in your opinion, let me open up with that, happened here? Was it the malice? Was it the negligence? Was it the complacency? Was it the conspiracy theory? Was it what do you think, in your experience, in your training, and in your opinion, happened?
Yeah, I think it's important in situations like this to separate fact from fiction. It's easy to jump to conspiracy theories. If you look at the arc of facts, oftentimes one line of facts may come very close to another line of facts, but they don't intersect. Yet, because they come so close, it makes it easy for people to say, "Oh, well, this must have happened," and that becomes a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that I don't know or understand that I'm curious about. And I'll come back to those concerning the shooter and, different things related to him. But what are the facts? Well, the facts are that, whatever date it was, I don't remember off the top of my head, but in Butler, Pennsylvania, President Trump
Mm-hmm.
had a campaign speech. The Secret Service was overall in charge of security, working with local law enforcement and state law enforcement. And they allowed a shooter to get within 130 yards, is what I heard, that rooftop.
100, yeah. I heard 151, and then somebody recently saying 130. But regardless, it's a very short distance. It's a very short distance.
Either way, yeah, exactly. I mean, anybody that understands sniper capabilities, for us, I mean, we train in personal security details. One of the biggest things is evaluating, the threat around in your defensive perimeter, and obviously understanding that perimeter, in my opinion, at a minimum should have gone out at least 500, if not 600 yards. And even from there out to 1,000 yards, we should have been looking at, hey, where are our lines of sight? What could be sniper positions? 150 yards, we'll just say hypothetically for right now, that's insanity to me. And obviously should have been, if they didn't have that building totally locked down, there should have been at least someone watching it on glass, meaning we had someone on binos or with a scope sitting there totally watching that building, because it obviously was an issue. So what's the bottom line in all this? The Secret Service definitely dropped the ball, and they can say, well, we worked with local law enforcement. They can finger point all they want at the end of the day. Ultimately, the Secret Service is responsible for protecting our presidents, our high-level government officials. That is their sole job. That's it.
Exactly.
There's nothing external. So they failed at a very high level. There were obviously the perimeter issues. There were communication issues because law enforcement, we already know there's all kinds of information out there. That's a fact. That law enforcement identified this guy as a person of interest. They felt like he looked suspicious, and they were watching him. And they called the Secret Service and told them, hey, there's an individual that we have concerns about. So this is where conspiracy starts to come in, because now people are trying to say, oh, they intentionally ignored that to allow this guy get on the roof to take this shot at President Trump. I don't believe that, guys. I worked through 3 different presidencies when I was in the military. I worked under President Clinton originally. I worked under President Bush. I worked under President Obama. Military and government organizations, for the most part, don't get me wrong, there are people that get politicized, but for the most part, we have a very specific job to do. And you have to look past politics, and people won't like to hear this. There were good things that Clinton did. There were good things President Bush did. There were good things that President Obama did while I was in the military as we conducted operations. It's no different from the Secret Service. It should not matter who is in office. Our job is to protect the president. So this conspiracy theory that, hey, they were in on it and they allowed this to happen, I don't believe. What I believe is it was total incompetence, and that I firmly believe. And now we're getting into an even bigger thing. Who are we hiring, and what level of standards are we maintaining? There was a lot of people who tried to say that many of the Secret Service agents looked out of shape. I agree. I looked at some of them. There were individuals that then tried to say, well, the woman had an issue holstering her weapon. There's a video of one of the women who was a Secret Service agent. I agree. What I said to them is, getting shot at is unnerving. I guarantee none of them were ever in a situation like that. And in SEAL training, we train to the highest level. But there's one thing we can't do. We can't shoot at people. I can't send bullets right next to people and hit them, because obviously the American taxpayer would be upset if we're shooting our own service members. So when you're shot at for the first time, it's pretty fucking overwhelming. So I'm going to give them, although they had a job to do, and I don't think they did a very good job doing it. At that end, I would need to put all of them through a skills test in an unbiased environment to say you were unqualified to do this. Do I believe some of them? Yes, because I believe the government has started to go down a path where we're not holding people accountable. It's more, oh, we need to be fair. If this person might not have met the standards, but because they're an insert, fill in the blank, race, creed, gender persuasion, color, I don't care what it is.
Was it DEI?
Yeah, DEI.
Including, yes.
That's a really dangerous thing. So do I feel like there's a degradation in performance in high-level organizations because you're not hiring based on capability? 100%. Did that lead to what happened in this situation? I don't know the answer to that. You would have to test them in an unbiased format. Like, give me a bunch of guys and let's put them through different scenarios, physical scenarios, tactical decision-making scenarios, shooting scenarios, stress-based scenarios. And only then would I be able to say, hey, I do think that they have met the minimum standard to be able to do this job. But at the end of the day, it sure doesn't look like that. It looks like a combination of incompetence, a combination of poor decision-making, a combination of poor communication, all the way to the highest levels. I'll finish with this and then I'll turn it back over to you. The Cheadle, that was her name, right? Cheadle, she was the head of the Secret Service, if I remember correctly.
Director?
Yeah.
The one that resigned 2 days ago?
And I'm very glad she resigned. She 1,000% should have resigned.
Yes, it was horrible.
For the failure of what happened, but also how she carried herself afterwards. The mere fact that she allowed the words to come out of her mouth on public television that the slope of the roof was an issue is mind-blowing to me. And it also tells me you have no tactical experience whatsoever. She had worked for the Secret Service earlier in her career, and then she left and went to the corporate sector. She had worked as an executive. I want to say Pepsi company. I may be wrong, but she had worked for an executive at a larger company before she came back to the Secret Service. I do question that. Did she have the ability to lead the Secret Service at the highest levels? I think if you are operating at the highest levels of Secret Service, you should have vast experience across the board, whether that's being with the actual PSD, working PSD details. Maybe you're part of the CAT team, so the team that's assigned in the event there is attack. Has she done sniper support? Does she understand all these different positions and go into this? Has she worked advance? Has she worked advance parties, going out and reconning the sites where we're going to be doing? I think whoever holds that position needs to have done all those positions before they hold that director title. And in my opinion, I'd be curious to see what positions she held in her past. And I 1000% support her decision to resign.
Yeah, I agree with you. It wasn't. I'm not so much believer in conspiracy theories. I looked at facts. Having a background in law enforcement, we always say don't Monday morning quarterback, and I hate doing that. But I definitely agree with you. It was a failure on multiple different agencies, and I 100% agree with you. Is because of the way and the lower standards that we have right now. I never worked in a Secret Service detail. I worked a few state and federal details. But my background is in municipal law enforcement. But even with that, at that caliber, if you have an event of this scale, it is a very laborious task and requires a lot of preparation. When you have such a person, such a principal coming into town, it requires all hands on deck. And to me, when I studied the layout, the map, right? First of all, the distance is minuscule. I mean, I will hit that. Even if it's 150 yards, right? What is that? A football field and 1.5 football fields or so. I mean, that's a 10 out of 10 hits right there with the LDR. But, to me, it's very scary. And then considering the fact that we had a water tower that could have been a support sniper oversight location. And I 100% agree with you. The perimeter should have expanded way further. And then the slope. I mean, there's a video where the operators, SWAT operators, are talking to the Secret Service agent, which is a whole different talk about that discussion. But the slope was very minimal.
It was.
So to talk about the fact that it was a coverage and a slope is just a lot of different figures into play. And then recently I finally saw the video where I saw that the law enforcement department, the municipal department, they actually got notified about the shooter and they started setting up a perimeter. And in my mind, I was like, perimeter is all, you cannot go wrong with the perimeter. But in this case, when you have an active shooter, when it's a confirmed threat, and I believe at that point it was a confirmed threat because the sniper did admit that he had eyes on the target for a while before he got the approval, which is a whole different topic. Why do you need an approval if you're a cover sniper? But maybe we can talk about that later. No action was taken immediately. In such a high-stakes situation, at this point, you don't really need clearance from a superior officer, because when you have clearly a person who's loaded with a rifle, playing around with the rifle or fidgeting, the term was used, and then you're not taking action in this case. So to me, those are all factors that come into play and tells me something about the situation.
Yeah, and I think, ultimately who's running the situation, how do you delegate authority down? Do you give your snipers, hey, if you see anything dangerous, if it's a clear and present threat, you have the ability to take the shot. I don't know if we know. It wasn't a clear and present threat. We know for a fact that if you look at the buildings, there were two sniper teams. If you were looking at the stage where President Trump was, there were kind of two sniper teams. Mm-hmm. Right and left of him.
Correct.
The sniper team on the right, the shooter was off to the right of President Trump.
Correct.
So the sniper team to the right was blocked. Their view was blocked by a tree. The sniper team to the left. And I will say that there was a little bit of slope. And I will say that the shooter positioned himself below the apex of the roof so that he was just coming on over the top, which reduced his signature. And those are interesting things because it makes me question. Those aren't normal things that people think about. So I was just kind of curious, and we're not seeing anything where this guy did extensive training. We're not seeing writing. I find that, I'll just say, curious.
Yeah.
So that's intriguing to me. But coming back to, at the end of the day, one of the things we do in the SEAL teams is we want to push our decision-making down to the lowest level so that for speed of action when it needs to happen. That way, if we put it to our snipers where we said, hey, there's a clear and present threat, you're cleared hot to pull the trigger. Unfortunately, and I've seen this a lot in combat, and I guarantee we're so risk averse, we're so worried about something happening that we make it to where, hey, you can't do anything without approval. So I can see what happens is probably the chief of the police was like, I have to be the one that authorizes you guys to do anything. And the Secret Service probably said, hey, chief, no one's going to do anything until we authorize it. So now you've got these different wickets that we're trying to go through to approve. And that creates breakdowns in communication and obviously stops people from making decisions because they're so worried about messing up and like, oh my God, what do I do in this situation? That it becomes almost a point of no return, that we're not making a decision until after something happened, which in this case was after shots were fired at President Trump.
Correct. I mean, just to think about the whole, let's say even if we account for all the internal ballistics for the shooter, right? Let's say he was the most precise shooter out there, the next Chris Kyle, and all the internal ballistics are accounted for. Looking at the external ballistics, we can never account for that, for humidity, for wind, for gravity, right? I think it was literally a miracle, especially that Trump was moving, he was talking. I mean, to be able to hit a target this small, even at 150 yards, it's not too small, but it's small enough and it's in motion. So people say, well, this was staged. I mean, if this was staged, why did a person behind him got hit with that bullet? Saving his family.
That conspiracy theory that this was staged is mind blowing to me. And people to say that this was a publicity stunt, Trump is incredible. Being shot at's overwhelming. I don't care who you are. The first time it happens, there's one thing if it's around that, if they're far away. It's a whole nother thing when you can actually hear the crack of the bullets go by your head, like what happened with Trump. And I guarantee all the agents and the people there. And to be hit by bullets hurts. Even the grazing round is painful. So for people to say, oh, Trump just did this as a publicity stunt, or, Trump getting up, that was so Trump, all he was thinking about was Trump. I agree with the vast majority of Trump's policies and have voted for him. There are things he does as a leader that drive me crazy, that I wish he could control himself a little more with the things he says, and he's not so sensational. But I'll tell you what, that moment when he got up and showed the American people, hey, I'm okay, and that was his mindset in that moment, it's the most presidential thing I've ever seen him do. It's the most presidential thing I've seen almost any president do in a long time.
Yes.
So that was amazing to me and gave me a lot more belief in him when sometimes he frustrates me.
I mean, that shot, that photo is epic with the American flag in the background. I mean, it does not get any better than that.
No, that's the picture of a decade.
Exactly. That will go down in history.
Which drives people on the left who hate him insane.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Let's look at the facts, right? Let's not waste time talking about conspiracy theories. But you brought up a very, very important point, and I've been talking about this point for a long time now. With whether it's men that I mentor, whether it's the job, lowering the standards of hiring to fit the criteria of DEI. I think this was a clear example, like you said, of complete incompetence, a certain lack of experience, I would say, because even if you take, never mind the holster situation, okay, under stress, you can't always, especially with a concealed holster, fine. But then your job as a unit, that's on stage unit for a Secret Service, your job is to be like a meat bag, right, to protect the principal. And when I see one individual cowering behind the president and other security officers who are covering him, I cannot take that. I cannot take that as lack of experience. I take the only word I can describe this is cowardness. And in this situation, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say this, I think it's spread across the nation in all agencies. I would even say, especially in municipal law enforcement departments, state and federal and above. And we see that nowadays. What do you think we can do to revert that back before it gets to the point where it's almost too late or point of no return?
Well, we need to have standards and we need to enforce standards. I mean, no different. We have laws. We need to enforce laws. I mean, we could go down the path. with what happened with in Washington D.C. last week with with Israel and the Palestinian support groups that basically burned the flag and then defaced our monuments. Uh,
Yep.
it's funny. I had a lot of people who wrote, as a matter of fact, my post today is about this. Do you believe that people should be thrown in jail for burning the flag? Because I had a lot of people who say that, and no, it should be protected by your First Amendment right. The problem is when it goes outside a peaceful protest, uh, and if you are just burning your flag, as much as I hate it, as much as I want to cave your skull in, you have the right to do that. The second it becomes violent, intimidation, the second you are spitting on people, the second you're defacing property, or you tear down somebody else's flag to burn it, guess what? That's vandalism. That's trespassing on private property. That's larceny. And you should be arrested. And if you give any lip to the police, they should be cleared hot to crack your skull. And it's amazing to me that we're living in a nation. We're creating a nation of people. We're talking about, oh my God, police are so afraid to do anything. And people are so emboldened because they feel like it's their right to spit in the face of police, to resist arrest. We need to get back where we enforce laws. If you break the law, you should be arrested. So now, coming back to the other discussion, we have standards. Standards need to be enforced no different than we need to enforce our laws. There are minimum standards. If you're going to be in the protector community, if you're going to be fire, law enforcement, military, whatever level of protector, they are physical jobs. It is a physical job to be in the military and wear body armor and fight and cover long distances and climb over walls and shoot and jump out of airplanes and all these different things. No different in law enforcement. It is a physical job. You are on the street. You are dealing with bad people. You could potentially be in physical altercation with them. You may have to drag a buddy that's been shot or drag an injured person that's been shot out of a bad situation. Same thing with fire. That's why we have these physical standards. And that should be the absolute minimum. We don't care the color of your skin. I don't care your religion. I don't care anything about you aside from, do you have at a minimum, the physical ability to do this job? The secondary component now becomes, okay, if you meet that minimum standard, now do you have the mental abilities to do this job? Let's talk about, you want to talk about, I'm sure you saw the police officer, I don't know what state it was in.
Sonia Massey, I believe. The shooting.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
From what I'm reading, that guy never should have been in law enforcement. He had a history of erratic behavior. He had a history of poor decision making. And I watched that video and I was like, holy shit.
It is pretty bad. It is. I always look at situations like this from a perspective of just let's dissect it from a perspective of the law, and let's dissect it from a tactical perspective, right? As an instructor myself for firearms and tactics, technically boiling water, if there was boiling water in the pot, can cause serious bodily injury or harm. But would I use lethal force on a female straight to the dot? Yeah. If she's threatening me with a pot of hot water? No. This is where exactly what you said, right? Common sense, mental capacity, right? Emotional maturity, training and experience comes into play. And it's not something, that would have done. So yeah, I would agree with you on that one.
We have to evaluate. So if we have the physical standard, now becomes, hey, do you have the ability to do this job? Because we are giving you a lot of responsibility. In the military, we're sending guys out in special operations teams that are making high level, potentially strategic decisions that, they could, some of the decisions we make, especially on highly classified cross-border things, it could lead us to war. So we need to make sure we have guys who make good decisions. In law enforcement, obviously, it can get people into bad decisions. So we've got to get back to enforcing standards. And that is the minimum thing. And that's really hard. We've created this environment where, we're struggling to recruit. Go back to Butler. I was reading some stuff. I don't know if this is true or not, guys, so I can't say if this was fact. I have not fact-checked this. But I was reading that some of the local law enforcement said they did not have the manpower to support the event. They said they had people on vacation, they had people injured, and they said, hey, we need more people. And they said, we just don't have them. And I think that's a major problem with law enforcement across the country. They don't have the people, because after the huge let's defund the police movement, you villainize police forces, you cut their funding. So many of them are so much smaller. I know for a fact, I have friends in Chicago that are working double and triple overtime because they don't have the amount of people to do the job, because they've driven all the law enforcement away from Chicago. The law enforcement is leaving in droves. I think I read they're a third of what they should be manned at.
Yes, I was just there a few weeks ago, and I saw one patrol car in 3 days that I was there. One for Chicago, and it's pretty scary. But I tell you what, because of the whole defund the police, because of the whole George Floyd riot, because of the whole situation, right? Standards were lowered, definitely, but also you take away the incentive for people to do this job. There comes a point in everybody's life. Well, if you look at yourself, like, and you ask yourself, as a police officer, do I really like what I'm doing? Because if you don't like what you're doing and you hate your job and you hate yourself, you're going to be a horrible police officer. You have to love what you do, just like in any other industry out there. And nowadays, the number of people out there who want to truly become police officers because they love the job is very, very little, because they completely decentralized this field. So I don't blame them. And what are we faced with nowadays? And I see it with my own eyes, is lower standards and literally scraping like the bottom of the barrel to be able to find and have proper staffing. That's unfortunate.
And then it's multiplied on the other side, because not as much training, not as much funding, and then we're not allowing you to do the job. So we're telling law enforcement today, hey, we're not just going to arrest people if they are violent against you, if they're spitting on you, if they're throwing things at you. In a lot of these riot situations I've watched, they're just telling police to stand there and take it. And that's amazing to me. Like, what reality do we live in that we're allowing that? I mean, I hate to tell you, once a protester moves into where you are, you're breaking the law when you do those things. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's illegal to spit on people, and you can be arrested. I think it's a misdemeanor. You would know better than me.
Correct. It's a misdemeanor, yeah. It's a misdemeanor.
Yeah. So, why are we not enforcing our laws? We're so afraid of the political correctness that, and the Palestinian protesters were a perfect example of this. Oh, this is such a hot button issue. It's a hot button issue. It shouldn't be that way. It should be, hey, if you break the law, I don't care race, creed, color, gender, it doesn't matter. I don't care what group you're affiliated with. If you break the law, the standard should be the same across the board. Now, I know there are a lot of people that are going to try and say, well, that's not the case. The police are improperly targeting, and maybe in some areas that I don't know, I can't speak to that. But I will tell you what, there is no doubt across this nation, we are not holding people accountable to the laws that we have.
No, and that's unfortunate. And if you really look at the statistics and the data, I mean, the crime rates are through the roof. Yeah. And then I have a lot of friends who work in border patrol across different states, and the data that they're providing to me, and I'm not just asking for their opinions, because I try to be objectively reasonable when it comes to the deciding factors and judging the situation. I'm like, give me the numbers. Like last month numbers or year-to-date numbers. How many have crossed? How many have been caught? How many have been killed? What's going on in the border? And the numbers are staggering. Yeah. And just if you just have any kind of common sense and you take that number, whether it's a monthly or quarterly number, you multiply it times 1 year, 5 years. It's scary. It's scary. I was just recently watching an episode where they're talking about how Venezuela fixed the crime and murder rate problem. Did you hear about that one?
No.
Genius idea. You know what they did? The same thing Castro did in the 70s. They cleared out their prisons and asylums. And guess where they send them? Just north, towards the border. Yeah. Solve their problem. I mean, great for them, but horrible for us. That means everybody who left their prisons and asylums are now either already here or on the way here, just like they were on the way to Miami from Cuba. And we all know what happened in the 70s and 80s in Miami.
And I will say then why and we should be doing some similar things. If you are not an American citizen and you break the law, you should be immediately deported. Like there is no, I mean, immediate offense, barring maybe a speeding ticket. But if you are doing something malicious, like what happened with what happened in D.C. last week. I read that there was quite a few visa holders who were involved in that, deported, arrested, deported. You're here. It's a privilege to be here. You're coming over here because you want to experience the freedom and opportunity that we have, whether it's through our educational systems, whether it's through the country we have. Guess what? If you choose to step outside the lines of peacefully protesting, you're deported, period. And that's how it should be. But once again,
It's unfortunately, I tell you, it's not like that, unfortunately, and it makes total sense, but common sense is not so common nowadays because you can commit crime and get away with it. I mean, you can be out through a no bail system, come out, do the same crime again, and then be out again. So it's crazy. We can talk about that for hours, but I want to ask you. Let's kind of like shrink it down to just a personal level, right? Let's talk about the state of awareness nowadays. Let's talk about safety and the community. And me and you both share similar values and as men, similar characteristics. We all, number one is tactics. Tactics is all, especially when you're out there with your family, with your loved ones. What can we as individuals and eventually collectively do to protect ourselves and our communities from what's already happening and going to happen if we don't do something about it?
I think you should have a mindset of awareness. And part of that awareness, I mean, that's part of my overcome mindset. There are three components of it. I work with a group called Tactical 21. We run training throughout the year. One of the courses we run is called the Overcome and Survive course, and we teach survival, defense, situational awareness, a little bit of self-defense, and then weapons handling, and then trauma medicine. And I think those are things that every American should have a basic understanding of. I think everyone on the planet should have a basic understanding of those things. At the end of the day, the most dangerous creature that walks this planet is us, humans. And
Very true.
The downside of humans is we have a tendency to be violent. There are people who, instead of trying to convince you and talk to you about, this is what I want, it's much easier for people to be violent. It's a sad fact in a downfall of humanity. And these people who think, oh, well, law enforcement will protect me or someone will come save me. The response times are only getting worse and worse. We're talking about the issues. Crime is up. The manning of police departments and fire departments and first responders is down. So the average response times for most places is a minimum of 8 minutes, 10 minutes. If you're out in a rural area, you're now talking 15, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to perform trauma first aid for your family, if you don't have the ability to defend yourself, I believe every law-abiding American citizen should own a firearm and know how to use it. I believe that you should understand basic security principles. I believe you should be very aware of situational awareness. I believe you should have at least 3 months of some kind of survival preparation in case something was to happen. It may not be a downfall. It may not be a violent part of society, but it could be anything. I mean, we could have look at what happened with Hurricane Katrina and the downfall of the city there. That was not, it was not it wasn't a attack or an enemy excursion. It was a natural disaster that led the city to devolve. And that's what happens. I always tell people we're no more at any given time. Society is maybe 96 hours away from chaos. I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah. Isn't that what it takes? The average of 96 hours?
Yep. Yeah. You disrupt something, power, food supply, internet, any of those things, and it will quickly, and the cities are going to be significantly more dangerous than in the rural areas. But it will quickly amplify when people can't get the things they're used to getting. So that's why I tell people and we teach, hey, these are the things we recommend you do. I work with a company called My Patriot Supply that provides ready hour meals. They have a 25-year shelf life. They are a dehydrated meal. And I have 6 months worth of supplies for myself and my family. I have go bags that are ready in the event something was to happen. I teach people how to do this because you never know. I mean, one of the questions I ask people in the course is, will you be ready? And most people say, for what? And I'm like, that's the problem. You don't know.
Yeah, better have it, not need it, than need it and not have it. I definitely agree with you. No, the everything you said is on point. I think we became so weak and docile, and I love history and I love reading history, mostly listening about history nowadays. And the other day, it kind of hit me. I was like, okay, let's look at us from a perspective of a barbarian, right? We're no different from what Rome was before it collapsed, or Byzantine, or even Great Sparta, right? We're so weak, we're so situationally unaware, we're so unsafe in our behavior, we're so unprepared that if I was a barbarian, I would be the ideal target. I don't need to settle somewhere. I don't need to grow wheat. I can just enter the country, slaughter all men, and after that, the country is mine. I have the beauty of the buildings, the infrastructure, the women, the food. Why would I not be a nomad and just go from country to country? So I think literally geographically, the only thing that's been saving us so far is the two oceans on each side. You know, Canada's not really a threat. And okay, I guess the southern border is a concern. But
Yeah.
thank God for our geographic location, just plain and simple. It's been saving us for hundreds of years, I think.
Yeah, the mindset has become very individual, and that's a dangerous thing. I mean, everything is about what's in it for me. How can the government can take care of me? Um, and yeah, really, I think America was founded on a principle of independence, of not only national independence but individual independence. Like, hey, you achieve success through your hard work. Um, and that really was what grew this nation. A lot of people came over here. So many immigrants came here, and through hard work and determination, they made a stake and a claim for themselves to grow into where we are today. It's harder to do that now. I won't lie, but it definitely is not impossible. The American dream is still alive. I believe in it. It just takes effort, and it takes being aware on all sides. Hey, I need to be a provider and I still need to be a protector. And I think if you call yourself a man and you have a family, you should have some level, you should have a basic level understanding of how to be a protector. And then you should obviously look at how can I be a provider. Those are the two areas that I think are critical.
So I'd agree with you with that one. One thing you always say, and I love it, when you mention is getting off the X. If you find yourself on the X, right, like Donald Trump did, right? Uh, you sort of got off the X, right? But unidimensionally, you just went down instead of to the side. But what can one do? Let's say for all the men out there, and since majority of my public are I coach men and cater to men. If we find ourselves on the X, which you always teach us often, what are the most important things you should do? And I don't know if you want to dive in between like the safety and tactics or just overall sort of, life and mental state. Give me some pointers, please, so we can share that with the public.
Yeah, I mean, the principle of getting off the X, I mean, obviously there's a tactical application. I mean, the idea, for those of you that may never have heard of this idea in the military, and I would say in law enforcement and other areas, the X is the point of attack typically. And if there is an attack, an ambush, sniper attack, explosion, whatever it is, the X is that 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 critical point. What I've expanded it to is that in life, so many people get stuck on the X. The X becomes the point of crisis. It becomes the point of chaos. It becomes the catastrophic event that happened in your life. It also becomes the sticking point. I've met a lot of people that get stuck on the X. Um, in their own mind. Like maybe there are a lot of you men out there who are like, hey, I'm never going to be successful. I'll never be a protector. I'll never be a provider. You're stuck on the X, man. You have bought into the bullshit of negativity. And the reality is to get off the X, I mean, action is the answer. Movement is the answer. Driving forward is the answer. And that applies whether it's in a gunfight or whether it's in a mental ambush in your mind and you're stuck on the X. In my book, Overcome, I teach something called the REACT methodology. Interestingly enough, it'll work in a firefight. It'll also work in your own life. So REACT is an acronym. So the R stands for recognize. You have to recognize you're on the X. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh, yeah, Alex, you were a police officer, and Jason, you were a Navy SEAL. Of course you can be a protector. Well, guess what, man? You can too. You don't have to be John Wick to be a protector. Being a protector just means you're prepared. If you have some survival meals, if you have a plan, if you talk to your family, if you have situational awareness and you recognize that things are happening, congratulations, man, you're a protector. You're protecting your family. And all that takes is some planning and some action. So the first level is recognition that, hey, I'm on the X. E stands for evaluate your assets. So what do you have to bring to bear to the problem? If it's, whatever it is, in this case, if we were to look at it from a survival or preparation, I could go take some training. You could go do some self-defense classes. You could purchase a firearm. You could do firearm training. You could buy survival equipment. You could go through our Overcome and Survive workshop where we teach you all these things and provide you first aid training and first aid equipment to be able to do that. A is assess options and outcomes. Now that you know what your assets are, now you decide, what am I going to do? What are the best options and what is going to lead to the best outcome? And sometimes when you're on the X, you might have to go through some short-term pain for long-term gain. Maybe you're grossly out of shape and you're watching this right now and you're like, well, I could never be a protector because, I can't even get off the couch. Once again, it takes action. And once again, you may have to start working out, and that's going to be uncomfortable. But in the long run, you're going to get this great outcome that enables you to be successful. C stands for choose a direction and communicate. So now you've decided, you've evaluated your assets. So you have an inventory of things you can do. You've assessed your options and outcomes. You've decided this is what I'm going to do to get off the X. You've chosen the plan. You now communicate it to others because guess what? You're a leader. You need to communicate it to the people around you that this is what I'm going to do, whether that's your family, whether that's your friends, whether that's your business. And then the T, the big one, you take action. You don't sit there and wait. Now is the time to go. Too many people will sit on the X, whether it's a mental ambush or whether it's a real world violent encounter. One of the reasons why in PSD, and I'll tell you what, the Secret Service messed this up too. Although it made an amazing moment for Trump. Trump told them to stop and they listened. They never should have done that. I'll be perfectly honest. They should have carried him off that stage directly into the armored vehicle and he should have been gone. And he told them to stop. That tells me they had poor training right then and there. That never should have happened. They should have got him off the X and away from that shooter and into a safe area, using their body as shields for him. So often when people are on the X, they get overwhelmed and they take too long and they're thinking they're waiting for the perfect moment or, hey, I've got more time. And the reality is you don't. The longer you sit on the X, it's like quicksand. And if it's a real world shooting scenario, then the higher your chances of being shot, or if you've already been shot, bleeding out. If it's a mental scenario or a business scenario, then the higher the chances you are going to bleed out mentally and emotionally. If it's a business scenario, the higher chances you're going to bleed out financially.
Yeah.
You need to take action and go. You've gone through this. You've come up with a plan. It doesn't matter if it's the difference between a good plan and a bad plan is the one that's executed, because you can execute a bad plan and fix it on the go. A good plan never executed, you just lay there and die with a good plan.
Yeah, a bad plan with a definiteness of action is better than a good plan with no action.
That's right. So that's the React methodology. I talk all about it in my book, Overcome. If any of you out there feel like you're stuck on the X in your life, that book will. I've had so many people tell me, "Oh my God, I didn't even realize I was stuck on the X," and like your book changed my life.
Interesting. What is your prediction for this year's election?
Man, I don't know. I think that President Trump would have beat President Biden in a landslide. Um, I think the country is so um, divided and so focused on, hey, we'd like to see a woman in office. We'd like to see uh, a person of color, which I have no issues with. The problem comes back to, once again, are they fully qualified?
Yeah.
Man, I would support anyone who is fully qualified. They've done the things they need to do that we feel like confidently they have the ability to lead the country. There are people that believe that about Kamala Harris. There's no doubt. I don't. I don't feel like she has the chops to do it personally. Um, Trump hurts himself at times. I wish that he could do a better job of recognizing that um, as as a leader, it's your job to lead everybody, including the people that don't agree with you and may not support you. But it's still your job to lead them, and you need to recognize it in your messaging. And you can tell me, there are people that'll say to me, "Jay, it doesn't matter. They hate us," and I agree. When I posted about Trump, I had a lot of people who wrote me and told me what an idiot I was. So, but the bottom line is, as a leader, you don't have the luxury of saying, well, fuck those people on the other side. I don't care. You
Yeah.
still have to think about how, at the end of the day, it's about what's best for our country. Going into this like, hey, screw them and let's just divide the country. I think it's the president's job to try and figure out how to bring us back together. I think Trump has the ability. Sometimes I think he needs to think about the things that he says because they come across much more sensational instead of uniting. So
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. So the answer is I don't know. I think a lot of people are 100% behind Trump after what happened. I believe it. And I will say uh, many of the people who attacked me made me agree. Like, hey, there are those of you that it doesn't matter. Trump could have cured cancer and you will still hate him and you'll hate me for being happy about cancer being cured. So because of that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do my best to, but I am a believer in the things that Trump believes in. I believe in a free market economy. I believe in a strong national defense. I believe in minimizing government regulation on businesses and across. I believe in personal responsibility and personal independence. I believe in accountability, enforcement of law, all these things that have more of a tendency to fall on the conservative side. So because of that, I'll be voting for him, but I don't know what other people. It's a strange time right now. So my only prayer um, is that we can continue to believe in our voting system, and that does not become compromised.
Okay. You talked about leadership, and I know you are a leader. I see you as a leader. I look up to you often. Obviously, you're a coach, our coach at Legacy. What, in your opinion, makes you a good leader? And I know you have your own team. Obviously, first and foremost, you're leader of yourself, and then leader of your family, then you're leader of your team. And we often talk about that, and you give us pointers. So, what makes you a good leader? What do you believe makes you a good leader?
Me myself,
Correct. Like,
only
what do you implement for yourself and for others that makes
leaders out there.
something? Well, you can touch on both, but I want to know what Coach Jason, like, who's a leader. Like, what is it that makes you a good leader?
I, I think I'm very goal driven. So I think individuals who are goal driven, it doesn't necessarily make you a good leader, but if you can be goal driven and help other people to accomplish those goals and to celebrate the winning of those goals together, and they're getting better in this process, they're growing and they're celebrating and they're achieving success also, that's a good leader. That's someone who has a vision of where they want to go, and they're bringing others along in that vision, and they're accomplishing positive things. I mean, at the end of the day, really, isn't that leadership, our ability to influence others to make a positive impact? And you could also say there are powerful leaders who have the ability to influence others to make a negative impact. I mean, if you look at individuals, I mean, obviously what Hitler was doing, that was a pretty, he managed to convince a whole lot of people to eradicate, you know, 6 million Jews,
Yeah,
6 million Jewish people. So leadership is powerful, uh, and it can be wielded both positively and negatively.
I agree.
So, but I would say that I personally believe an individual who is a goal setter and he can teach others how to be goal setters can become a good leader, to teach them the tools, to teach them how to build structure, to teach them how to accomplish the things they want in this life. And if that falls into an alignment of what that leader is trying to accomplish, also now, you create this strong performing team, which leads to great cultures in businesses or communities or organizations.
You going from military field, and you had quite a story to tell. I wish I had time to share with my viewers and listeners. But going from military field into a now business field, uh, any resemblances and any major differences that you think, or did that make you stronger, more prepared to be an entrepreneur and a leader in the field of business, a free market economy, or the opposite?
Um, I think it gives you a lot of amazing tools. The civilian world does not work as fast as the military. The military has had over 200 years to create processes and procedures and a rank structure and a system and unit integrity and unit camaraderie and unit culture. And sometimes it gets off track, but hopefully they bring in different leaders. The military has a constant churn of leadership, but the system for the most part stays the same. We have a mission. It is our mission to protect and defend the United States of America. So because of that, it gave you great mission purpose. It gave you drive. It gave you all these different things. And for me, I was fortunate to be part of a very high level. The special operations community is our top tier individuals in the military. So you are working with literally some of the best individuals from our country, some of the most talented, physically, mentally, emotionally, super smart, amazingly gifted problem solvers. So it taught me a lot. You also take that for granted because I grew up in this community. So you just kind of accept that this is how the world works. So when I got out into the civilian world, I would get frustrated because I would hire people and I'd be like, hey, here's what I need you to go do. I need you to go, do X. And unfortunately, in the civilian world, individuals who operate at that level, I mean, it's just a reality. Not everybody operates at that level. Obviously, if they did, we'd have an entire nation of Navy SEALs. We don't. Um, and you have to accept that. You have to meet people where they are. There are some people who are amazing. They're amazingly good and very happy to do a small task. They never want to be in a leadership position. They never want their level of challenge is at a much lower level. And I think that's a leader's job to figure out, I think John Gordon wrote Good to Great. And in Good to Great, they talk about getting the right people in the right seat on the bus. Who's on your bus and putting people in the right seat. And that was one of the challenges I think I found when I got out of the military. In special operations, you can almost take a guy and say, I need you to do this. And for the most part, because of the way we train and because of the caliber of people we bring on, they'll figure it out. And usually they'll figure it out and make it better before they bring it back to you. And in the civilian world, it doesn't work that way. Everything works slower. There's a lot more instruction and a lot more guiding and nurturing the culture, if you will, And when you find an individual that truly operates at that high level, they're your top 5% performers in the company. And that took me a long time to figure out.
Got it. I want to close off by this question and ask this question.
So for those of you out there, be the 5%. Be the business, man. Just crush it. Be that guy that your boss doesn't have to tell you, you're taking the initiative and solving problems before he even comes to you. And if you do that, you will be invaluable, and they will never want to let you go.
That for sure. That one I agree with. There's a few guys on my team who are invaluable, and I always tell them, you guys, I value you. So it's important to recognize that in the team.
But you gotta value the guy who is not that guy, because they're also a huge part of your team. You need that guy that does that small. Maybe somebody else may say, well, I don't want to do that. But guess what? If it's necessary and it's making the team better, that small thing, you need to value them too. Because if he leaves or she leaves, you're going to have to get somebody else to do that small thing that maybe nobody else wants to do, but that person was either willing or even like to do it. So everybody on your team, you need to recognize they play a part.
That's actually a very good point. Armored Down. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I'll definitely, put that in my toolbox. Love it. I got just one quick question for you. I want to close it off with this. It's a question I ask to all my guests. And my question to you is, what do you think is the purpose of life, Coach?
I wish I wrestle with that. I think everyone does. Every man does. Every woman. I personally think it's to leave behind a positive impact. And I think every person's impact is based on their own personal makeup and potential. And I think for all of us, it's how do we maximize our potential? Only God knows that. Like God knows that the 100% version of Jason Redman is this. And I don't know where I am in that. I don't know if I'm here. I don't know if I'm here. I don't know where that is. So I think exploring that and trying to go after and balance, the different opportunities and what I'm doing to make that impact, so that hopefully at the end of my life, I will have left a massive positive impact on the people around me, on my family, on my friends, on the things that I've touched and the things I've been involved in. And I hope someday when I get to heaven, I sometimes struggle with my faith, and I hope God will say, you know what, Jason Redman, you did pretty good. You were a doubting Thomas your whole life, but here's Thomas right here. I want you to meet him because he doubted me too. But guess what? You did okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, Coach, if it makes you sleep better at night, you definitely left a positive impact on at least one person who's staring at you right now. Well, so thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for all the coaching sessions. Thank you for all the guidance. Thank you for all the knowledge you put into us. And thank you for this last minute episode. I really appreciate you carving out some time in your busy schedule and sharing your knowledge and expertise with me.
Yeah, glad to do it. Thanks for reaching out, man. So look forward to seeing you in the tribe. For those of you,
I'll drop all your information for my followers so they can find you and so they can learn from you like I'm learning from you every day.
Thanks, man. So
awesome. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate you. Have a good day.
Yep. Thanks, man.